Hey, it's Software Student here, and today we're going to continue working with some basic web development, where today I'm going to be talking a bit about the structure of CSS and showcase how we use it, more or less. So I already have some plain HTML set up with some CSS, where we have this website, just having a header, this is a website, we have some random text, we have some labels, and some text inputs. And as mentioned as well in the HTML, we have the header with the document title, we have a h1, the header, we have a paragraph with the text, we have a div containing our labels, and some inputs. So in the last video I talked about how we could connect our CSS file to our HTML, and in this case I'm just using a simple linking our style sheet and giving the position of the style sheet. Inside our style sheet we have a few components. So firstly, one thing that's quite important is that we can make some comments, where we would have the beginning of a comment, which is this one, and the end of the comment, and inside here I can write whatever. We then also have these CSS components where, for example, three main things we can do. We can either just define that all plain h1 elements, in this case, are going to be blue and censored. So no matter what, as long as we create just a plain h1 element, it's going to be blue and censored. So right now I have not just this website. This is a website, but if I added another one down here, h1, and just did a test, for example, you will see that even though I didn't add anything to this one, because we're defining inside our CSS file that all h1 elements have these attributes, it's just added directly. We can then also define our HTML elements with a class or an ID. For example, I have this div with a class, so all the elements inside this class will be infected by this class grid. And inside CSS, we create a class by doing a dot and then the name of the class. So in this case, my dot grid means that everything inside my HTML that contains the class grid will be affected by this, which in this case put them inside an inline grid, which is why we have these name and text fields underneath each other instead of just being next to each other. We're then similar with my class, which can be put on multiple elements. We also can create an ID, which is a unique identifier which can only be used on one element. So we can have one specific ID. So for example, I added to this label, this one, the city label. It gave the city label the ID city. And inside my style class, I defined that hashtag, which defines as an ID, hashtag city, have the color red. So that's very much the basic of the components. We can do it for all of some element, we can do it for a class, and for a city. And something that's also quite interesting, I think I'll just showcase, that we can do quite a lot of things with CSS, but it's just the basics, but we can also add more stuff. Instead of just saying that all the city IDs are red, we can do all the city IDs, colon, and then some effect, for example, on hover. So whenever we hover with the mouse on top of our element with the city ID, we could, for example, change the color to blue. So now, when we look at our website, I have my city which is red, but when I hover with the mouse, it turns blue. It doesn't really have any functionality, but it just changes the looks of it. And just to showcase that our IDs can only be used one, but our classes could be used somewhere else. So if we just copied div, made another one, also contain the grid, maybe let's change it so we just have one label named label 23, for example, and gave it an input of a number instead, we would see that this div next to the other div, because this one is kind of like a box of elements, and then next to it we're starting with a new box of elements, which then again is going to be underneath each other. Or we're going to add like a break, which is not the best way of doing it, but it works to put it underneath. So technically here we have one box of elements and another box of elements. So this was just my quick introduction to more basic CSS, and of course there's infinite amount of stuff we can actually do with this, and depending on how we do it, but just for now have the basic understanding that we can define for all of some element, using classes or IDs. And then of course, all the different kind of stuff we can actually do with these components is not infinite, but there's quite a lot of stuff we can do. And then simply just use Google. In this case, Google is your friend. If you want to do something, have a basic understanding, just Google it. But otherwise, this was my quick showcase of CSS and HTML in basic web development. So if you enjoyed this quick showcase, please leave a like and subscribe, and I wish you all a wonderful